I'll turn this over here momentarily to Avery Ellison. He's in charge of our Consumer Protection Division. But Avery came to me some time ago with something he had seen frequently involving car sales, typically from dealerships who work in the sort of the secondary market, used car lots, and how it impacted consumers. And then through a particular couple of cases, Avery was able to engage with the Treasurer's Office, Ms. Kazira's office, and found that there was maybe an opportunity for the two of our offices to work together to benefit the consumers of Sedgwick County. And so this is really their brainchild. I'm just here to hear what they have to say. But I'll thank them both in advance for the time they put into this. But I think it'll be a benefit to consumers, citizens in Sedgwick County, that these two offices work together on this project. So, Avery, why don't you tell folks about it?
Thank you. Well, as Mark indicated, there's an overlap between our two different agencies. Obviously, we handle it because of consumer protection, but Ms. Kazira in the Treasurer's Office handle it because of the importance of titling your vehicle. And unfortunately, what we noticed over the trend of the last 2 and now into the 3rd year is that there's been a steady uptick in used car dealerships selling vehicles, but then not providing timely the titles. They are required by law within 60 days to provide the title of the vehicle to the owner. And so what we've decided with our partnership, a couple things we wanted to address. One, we want to get out to the community and put them in a position where they can better protect themselves by asking some basic and critical questions. We've worked together. We've put together this handout, which we'll provide all of you. Basically, so to put the consumer in a position where they can ask, before I buy this car, do you have the title of the car? If you don't have the title, who does have the title? That would already put the consumer in a better position to understand who are the parties involved in this transaction, who might have their title. And then next, if they're comfortable with the responses they provided and decide to engage in that transaction, then again, by law, within 60 days of the transaction, they must be provided title so that they can therefore go to Ms. Kazira's office and have the car property title in their name. Now, unfortunately, what brings us here is that a lot of times this doesn't happen. So another thing Ms. Kazira and I have done is try to streamline the process because, again, people in the community, they might not know that consumer protection is the place to go. They may go to the Treasurer's Office and run into problems there. Well, together, between our agencies, we're streamlining the process so they know to come to the District Attorney's Office. We can sometimes help facilitate, help them getting the title. Sometimes it can be something as simple as just poor bookkeeping on the dealership's part. Sometimes it's, unfortunately, we found that it's at times where the dealership is going out of business, and during that time period, they're not paying their finance company, and therefore they don't have the title, but they continue to sell vehicles. And even in some extreme cases, we found it where the dealerships are holding on to title as leverage because they essentially want to shake the consumer down for more money. Either one of those is not acceptable, and that's why we're doing what we're doing here today. So I'll also let Linda chime in.
Okay. Well, as you're aware, there is 60 days for people to come and get their title work done at the tag office. And titles normally look like this. There's no names on any of this. And the dealership, when you go to trade your car in or you purchase one, they need to assign that over to the consumer. In addition to that, they also have to, of course, collect the sales tax that's required by law. And then people bring their title work into our office so that we can get the vehicle registered and get it legal for them to drive. I do appreciate Avery and Mark's efforts on helping us get the word out because a lot of times people do not receive their titles in the timely manner, and they were out the money to buy the cars, obviously. And we want to make sure and help our consumers in Sedgwick County because that's a lot of money for various people throughout the community, and we have to be able to assist them and help them in any way we can to make sure that they get their titles in a timely manner, that the titles are ready for the consumer to go ahead and come to the tag office and to do their title work.
So in addition to the information sheet that's going to be available to consumers, and as I understand it, Linda, maybe even displayed in the tag office, is that right?
Yes, we're going to display these in as many locations as we possibly can. I'm also going to send these out in the second half tax statement bills. It'll be printed in English as well as in Spanish for our community, and hopefully we don't have to engage Mark and Avery's resources very often anymore for this. We have seen an uptick over the past few years in these people not being able to get their titles. And ultimate goal is to make sure that our consumers are protected, our citizens, and that people are not being taken advantage of.
So we've got two things here. We've got the public service, public information side of this, which is today, and telling you all, and then making sure that people receive this information. They'll see it when it's on display at the tag office, but obviously we want them to know this before they show up to get a tag on a car they don't have a license or a title for. So the public information is one component of this. The second component is the relationship between our offices, so that consumers who do find themselves in that unfortunate position know where to go to contact our consumer fraud, consumer protection unit, so that we can try to intercede on their behalf and get this resolved. Avery's also got a document in front of him with some more information that might be germane to the balance of this presentation.
And when we say an uptick, what does this mean and how many people is it impacting? Well, in 2016, we had 35 complaints of this happening. In 2007, it jumped to 40, and already in the first 2 months, 3 months of this year, we have 44 complaints. And so this isn't just as Linda said, first of all, it is a significant financial impact. That person has put a down payment or paid a substantial amount of money for a car that they now can't legally drive. So there's the first consequence. The second consequence is, of course, if you don't have title and you haven't tagged it, an officer has to, obviously still do his duties. And we've seen cases where people have been pulled over. Obviously, it's a violation to not have proper registration on the car. The car's even been impounded. So now you're taking an already bad situation and it's being made even worse because of the failures of a dealership to do what it's supposed to do. So that's really why it's so important and why we're reaching out to the community.
Who was it incumbent upon originally? Is it the dealership, or that has to make sure that happens? And then are you guys prosecuting those folks that are breaking the law, that aren't providing those?
We have, and to use proper terminology here, it's a civil matter. So when the dealership, it is their responsibility. If they've engaged in the transaction, you've purchased the vehicle from them, they have to make sure that you've been provided title within 60 days. And we have had cases where it's not just some inadvertent mistake, but we've seen a systematic pattern of this, in which case we have initiated a civil consumer protection matter, civil lawsuits in this case.
Those are initiated by this office, and then Avery's the one who initiates those and handles them, and then you get the updates from time to time that a consent decree has been signed between our office and the individual, wherein they agree to pay somebody back and investigative fees and promise not to do it again. That's our recourse here using the consumer protection angle.
Who ultimately has to pay? Is it the consumer, because they have to deal with get the tag, having to get the title? I mean, who's been getting the short end of this stick? Has it been the consumer?
It's the consumer, because at the end of the day, right, they've already paid the money to the used dealership, so the dealership's got their money. The consumer does have a car, but they can't legally drive it. And so a lot of times it can even cost them more money to try and get quiet title or initiate other proceedings to try and get the title back, so they have it and they can properly register it.
Is the tag office being forgiving or understanding that situation? I mean, how are you dealing with the people that have come up to this situation?
Unfortunately, we have to refer them to the district attorney's office because state law will not allow us to register a vehicle without a title.
I mean, at the end of the day, there's a reason for all of this. It's, you don't want me to come down and take your car and come title it and act like it's mine, so then I can sell it. There's a reason that you have to have a title before you can sell your car and the other guy can buy it. You have to have that registered before you can go get insurance on the car, and if you don't have the title, you don't have insurance, you can't drive. And then, as these two have both explained, the problems just compound. Then you've got a guy who's stuck going, okay, this is my only set of wheels to get to work. I'm out the $3,000 I paid for it. I paid for it in cash. I can't get my title. It's now at 65 days, 61 days for that matter. I can't get title on it. I can't get a regular tag on it. So now what do I do? And unfortunately, people who are in that dire straits to begin with, who might be the kind of folks who need to go buy a $3,000 car, who don't have the means to go to a new dealership and have the kind of credit history and that sort of thing that they could go to a dealership that wouldn't put them in the situation, then they've got a difficult decision to make. And who could blame them? But they're going to probably drive so they don't lose their job. Meanwhile, there's a cop out there who doesn't know all the backstory, is just enforcing the laws, and it just becomes a real problem. So the point was, rather than continue to have these sort of circular issues, let's get our offices together. Linda puts them on a fast track to us. first of all, hopefully we're getting some notice out. People find themselves in this position in the first place. But if they do, Avery's got a pretty streamlined process. But at the end of the day, it takes a couple of government agencies. And then the other thing that we haven't even mentioned yet is been working with the Department of Revenue in Topeka to try to get them to understand the situation this given person's scenario that they've encountered. And that's one of the things Avery Shop will do here in this office is intercede on their behalf because they don't want to have to go out and hire a lawyer, spend more money to get this thing fixed. So it's kind of a black hole for folks, and we're trying to avoid this by shedding some light on it and streamlining a process that they can utilize to get themselves back on their feet.
I guess my last question, I guess the one thing that was lacking was education. Consumers knowing what their rights are, knowing the process, and basically protecting themselves.
Yeah, and actually, Mark touched upon it, and that question is a great follow-up. One of the things that customers need to know and consumers need to know is that on that 61st day, the transaction is void. You can take the car keys back, and the dealership has to take back their car. Because if they didn't facilitate that transaction within the 60 days, it's like the sale never happened. Even if you drove it to and from work for the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 months.
59 days.
Yeah, 59 days. On the 61st day, if they haven't provided you title, case law supports it, that you basically get a full refund. And the dealership should comply.
And if they don't give you your money back, then what?
Then that's where we get involved.
Are there numerous dealerships that are accused of this that you've seen, or is it just one? Can you tell us?
There's been several, and some of them are in litigation, so I won't get into specifics. But last Christmas was a prime example. We had one dealership, and again, like I said, sometimes it's a symptom of the company going out of business. We had a dealership, and there was a consent judgment is on file, where right before Christmas, we had about 25 consumers who all bought cars. None of them were provided title. Now, in that position, obviously the dealership had created the issue, but was cooperative and did work with us in facilitating that. And again, they did agree to a consent judgment that it wouldn't happen again. The business did go out of business, but they did try to help the consumers to make sure they signed whatever they needed to properly convey title. And then there's been some since as well.
Does this only affect people if they're going to the dealer or if they buy from a private seller?
That's a loaded question. So if you buy a car from anybody, they have to give you the title within 60 days, okay? There is a distinction there. If I go on Craigslist, and let's be clear, or some other media or internet outlet, we've had dealerships that pretend they're a private individual but are really a dealership. So that's the first thing. So are you really dealing with an individual or are you dealing with a dealership is the first question. Obviously, if there is a person-to-person transaction, the standards in consumer protection are set up against business versus consumer because there's inherently an uneven playing field. But consumer to consumer, you still have to get the title, but there's going to be less protections otherwise.
And for consumer to consumer, I recommend that you actually get that title when you make that transaction and make sure that you're buying it from that individual, that they have not jumped or skipped a title, because occasionally we've had instances where people have bought a car from someone, not registered it, and then sold it to someone else just to avoid the taxes, the sales tax, maybe change their mind after they bought it. But on any title transaction, it has to go in an exact chain of ownership. And a lot of times people look at Carfax and things like that, and there might be something skipped on there. That's probably what has happened. But on individuals, I really do recommend you don't buy any vehicle without actually having the title from that person signed over to you. I'm not trying to, because it's a lot easier to purchase it that way than. But now the dealerships, they've got assignment areas on the back of the titles, and state law will allow us to allow a dealer to assign it from one person to another person. So I assigned it from myself to the dealer. Dealer assigned it from himself to Avery on the back of that title, on the back of the Kansas title.
And again, I think that's where the public information is so important, right? Ask the question.
Yeah.
If this is your neighbor and you say, hey, can I see the title? And they say, no. Why not? And they may again always still have a loan on it, whatnot. You go to a dealership, again, they may not have it. It may be financed. Even the dealership may be financing the car. But that's why the question is so important. Do you have the title? And if the answer is no, why not? Who does? again, arm yourself in a position where, again, if they lie to you, well, then that makes the case for us, if it winds up, breaking down, even stronger, because they've misrepresented some material things to you. And if they say everything and you're comfortable with that, again, then at least you're informed. You kind of know what the issues are before you hand over that check.